Hey, I'm George Berry, the Wood Guy. Welcome to SAWED, the Southern Academy of Woodworking and Environmental Design. Today we're covering imported woods. Although you never say imported wood in the wood trade, you always say exotic wood. So if it grows outside the United States, then, or the continental confines of the United States, it is domestic. If it's outside of that, it's exotic. So mahogany is the most common exotic wood. Although it is so common in America, it's almost domestic. It doesn't grow in America. There's a tree in Hawaii that's close to it called koa. And you get down to Cuban, there's Cuban mahogany, which is very highly prized. So this is an example of mahogany. The tree is very large, so it's very rare to find a knot in mahogany because the first limb might be 50 feet off the ground. So you could get two 25-foot boards before you ever get to the first limb. Mahogany is one of the trees that grows plentifully in the Amazon rainforest basin, so there's a lot of it. And you can go to a domestic lumber yard that has nothing but, domestic lumber, and they'll have mahogany. So it's almost a domestic wood, although it doesn't grow in the United States. And it's a porous wood, so you have to fill mahogany before you finish it. The pores do show. The vessels are fairly large in mahogany, but you don't see a lot of grain pattern. And it's a medium dense wood, and it's one of the woods that is fairly stable. It doesn't expand and contract too much with changes in humidity. You can get away with things in mahogany that you can't get away with in other hardwoods. So it is, by definition, since it doesn't grow in the United States, it is an exotic wood. And we were talking in the previous lesson about medullary rays and how they run from the center of the tree to the bark of the tree. So this is what happens when you quarter saw medullary rays. You get those little flakes in there. Same thing, oak is bad about it, and this is Australian lacewood. So it is imported from Australia, and it's prized because of these medullary rays. If it's cut right out of the log, you get a lot of this. And when you order it, you can order it from the importer by the size of the flakes. They could be dime size, quarter size, 50-cent size. So, and it's moderately expensive. Here's another mahogany board. Here's an interesting African wood. It's called bloodwood. The sap is actually red, and when you cut into the tree with an axe, it looks like you're cutting into blood. So they call it bloodwood. Some people are allergic to the dust of exotic woods. So that if you sand bloodwood, sometimes it's in the Paducah family. If you sand Paducah, it has sort of a ginger smell to it, and some people are very allergic to it. It put one of the top 10 woodworkers in America in the hospital. Well, it was about 30 years ago, and he was had some Paducah, some bloodwood, on a lathe, and he was sanding in it. When you're sanding on a lathe, of course, the dust comes straight at you and hits you right in the face. And he was sanding Paducah, and his tongue and his throat got large and swelled up, and he had to go to the hospital. So, and the unions in the North, and they're not very big here in the South, but the cabinet makers and joiners union in the North will not let you work with exotic woods in their factories because of that reason. Some craftsmen are very allergic to the dust created by exotic woods, and Paducah is one of the worst. Here's more Paducah. Here's an exotic wood called Purple Heart. It's very hard, very dense. It's almost a tone wood. It's so hard. Tone woods are woods that you would make musical instruments out of, like you would make a clarinet out of a tone wood. Here's an exotic wood that most people are familiar with, although this is pretty dark. This is ebony. You know, Steinway pianos, they use a lot of ebony and ivory, but Steinway has sort of a deal with the importers, and they get to pick all the ebony they get to pick of the litter of all the ebony that comes into America. So the time it gets down to me, it has little defects in it like that. But usually when you use an ebony, you're not using a whole lot of it, you're just using it for the color. Most woodworkers will use exotic woods for their color. In woodworking, it is considered a crime to stain wood. If you want a dark colored wood, you should use a dark colored wood. You don't use a cheap light wood and then stain it dark. Although in commercial work, you have no choice. You have to copy the designer's sample. But most woodworkers, if they want a real red wood, will use bloodwood. If they want a dark wood, will use walnut or ebony. Here's an exotic wood. This is Brazilian rosewood. Some of the trouble with exotic woods is they grow in rainforests, they grow real big, they grow tall, and what will happen is their roots will go into the rainforest floor. Rainforests don't have deep, deep soils. They have shallow soil. So the roots go out long ways, and the trunks will go up and have buttresses on them from the roots, and they will go up and grow up tall, and the center of the tree will rot before the tree is full grown. And so when you're buying an exotic wood like rosewood, you'll find there'll be a lot of rot in the wood. You sort of have to cut between the rot. And because this is expensive, they'll sell you that rot too. So you have to choose those boards pretty carefully. Here is another exotic wood that I have a scrap from building some furniture. This is Colombian rosewood. Here is a wood called cocobola. And cocobola comes in brilliant colors. When you cut cocobola, it can be green, orange, and red right in the middle of it, right next to each other. It looks like a weather map sometimes. Of course, you know, you have to be exposed to these exotic woods or you don't know anything about them. I was a woodworker for 7 years before I went to graduate school, and I had to ask if rosewood came from a rose bush, but I didn't know any better. I thought rosewood might come, it was expensive because it came from a rose bush, but actually comes from a tree in the Dalbergia family. Here's another wood that most people have heard of. This is zebra wood. It's not as zebra as you might think, but it is dark and light. So that's why they call it zebra wood. Here I've finished this side of it. So you can see the contrast in the zebra wood. There are a few other woods. There's many. Every tree has its wood, so every tree in the world has its wood, and if it doesn't grow in America, then it's exotic wood. Now, they did a lot of research in softwoods grow much faster than hardwoods. Softwoods can grow to maturity in 20 years. I used to know a tree farmer in Georgia who wanted to send his son to college, so he planted acres of pine. And by the time his son was ready to go to college, he harvested that pine for pulpwood and made, $150,000. So here's a wood that they found in the world. This is called Leptus. And they wanted a hardwood that would grow fast. And what they did is they found a tree that when you cut it down, a new tree grew back from its trunk. But because it was completely mature root system, the new tree that grew back from its trunk grew very fast. So then they have a hardwood that now grows fast. Most hardwoods might take 30 years, 50 years to grow. But Liptus, this wood right here, I only have a sample of this because it was a piece of molding that was made out of Liptus. This Liptus will grow to maturity in 20 years. It grows faster than a softwood because they reharvest the same trunk. It grows back from that trunk, goes and they chop it down again and it grows back again. So this is an example of Liptus. One more thing before I leave. This is a board, an engineered board made out of bamboo. This is called plyboo. But bamboo is not a wood because it does not come from a tree. It comes from a very large grass. Next time, we'll cover exotic veneers.